It's one of the most extraordinary moments in Britain's history. Prime Minister Boris Johnson refusing calls from his own cabinet to resign. Nine's Brett McLeod is outside the Prime Minister's residence. Brett, the Queen could be dragged into this mess.
Yeah, this is the site of one of the highest wind speeds ever recorded by man.
Arson could be the cause of a fire at the Sydney home of controversial comedian, commentator and YouTuber Friendly Geordies.
Supine protoplasmic invertebrate jellies.
And to get hot, I got hairy legs that turn turn blonde in the sun.
I will not be lectured about sexism and misogyny by this man.
The decision of one man to launch a wholly unjustified and brutal invasion of of Ukraine.
Up yours, woke moralists. We'll see who cancels who.
Hello and welcome to episode 14 of the Fence-Sitters podcast. I am here, William Brooke, and my lovely co-host, Tiago Armitage. How are you going, Tiago?
Yeah, pretty good on this rainy day. It seems like it's been raining solid for about 3 weeks. I'm sure to our UK listeners that's not very notable, but I don't think our drainage system is quite up to being able to deal with that much rain. So
all of Perth is underwater.
Basically, yeah. Ever heard of the sunken city of Atlantis? That's Perth in a few weeks.
Yeah, sunken city of Perth. And I'm recording from our lovely little apartment in Budapest, which, if you don't know, is the capital of Hungary. So there's the region of Buda and the region of Pest. And would you believe it? They come together, and that's where Budapest is. And the Danube River kind of flows through that. And no, it's a very nice city. I'm very surprised. It's quiet, it's calm, good public transport, and it's very clean as well, which has surprised me for a major European capital city. But yeah, without any further ado, should we dive right into what we've been reading and watching and consuming?
Yeah, sure. You've probably got a more interesting one than me, so you can go first.
I'll start off, all righty then. I'm in Budapest, and I was walking along the main street, and I passed this cinema. And in the front of the cinema was this artwork of Wes Anderson's new film, Asteroid City. And I thought that Asteroid City wasn't coming out for ages and ages and ages. Then I thought, oh, maybe this is just some kind of advert for later on. And I went home and I looked it up, and then, no, Asteroid City had been released in Hungary like 2 weeks ago, which for some reason is a very early release date. So I thought, oh, I'll give that a watch. Anyway, I went to the cinema two evenings ago, and I was very impressed. Of course, it is just classic old Wes doing what Wes does with all of his symmetry and colours and, the Wes Anderson kind of style, which, whether you like that or dislike that, it's him. Let him do his thing. So apart from that, that was quite good. But the actual story, I really enjoyed. And I think it really kind of got to the core of some pretty deep, existential questions through comedy and dry humor, and almost absurdism, which I think is really quite good. And I mean it was an absolutely stellar cast as well. So I've written them down just for the list. So it has Tom Hanks, Scarlett Johansson, Jason Schwartzman, Margot Robbie, Adrian Brody, Willem Dafoe, Steve Carell, Tilda Swinton, Bryan Cranston, and Jeff Goldblum. Jeez. And that's even listing some people off who weren't there. One thing I love about it is some of the major actors get hardly any screen time. Like Margot Robbie had one scene. One scene. Which is, and Steve Carell plays this really kind of annoying background character who just pops up every now and then and doesn't really help at all. But yeah, no, it was good. So the actual film is like the Asteroid City aspect, which when you watch the trailer, it just looks like it's it's about the Asteroid City plot. That itself is actually a play. So it's like a stage play. So it's like a film about a stage play. And you watching the film, you can see the actors like kind of within the play, if that makes sense. So it separates you. It's kind of hard to explain, but it's meta in that regard, in that it's like you're watching actors going through the thoughts in their head, trying to play characters.
Yeah.
So it's like actors playing characters.
Yeah.
And because of that, the main guy, Jason Schwartzman, he's able to have like this existential kind of crisis when he does the classic thing of losing himself in the character, and then he comes out of the play, out of the Asteroid City kind of set, and onto the production set of the play, and he kind of has like these realizations and these moments. And Wes Anderson does it like really, really well. He whenever it's in the Asteroid City play, everything's in color, in those pastel kind of yellows and oranges and blues and everything. And then when it comes out of that, it goes completely black and white. And there's this one moment where there's like a narrator in the black and white section, and he accidentally ends up in the play at one point in the color section, and he looks around and he's like, am I meant to be here? And everyone just looks at him, and he like awkwardly sidles off. So yeah, it's really good. I won't spoil any more than that. I mean, there were points literally where I was laughing out loud just for the absurdity of it.
Yeah.
But like, if you didn't like French Dispatch, I feel like you would like this.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because French Dispatch was it was like divided into those three stories, and there wasn't really a central message. But this is definitely, there's one central story, there's one message. It's very easy to realize when it's in the play and when it's not. I think he did a really good job with it. So yeah, I don't know, that's my thought.
Good. Yeah, that's definitely one I'll be catching when it gets over here. Weirdly released early in Budapest, which is very strange. But, you know, such is. Now,
such is.
What have I watched this week, Will? Okay, picture this. The date is the 16th of June. I'm winding down for the night. I'm laying in bed. It's about 9:15. Jeffrey picks up my phone. Sorry, what was that?
Alright. It's quarter to 9.
Yeah.
It's 8:45.
Sorry.
That's pretty early.
Well,
okay.
Jeff hits up my phone. He says in the boys' group chat, "Who wants to go see The Flash?" I'm like,
oh.
It starts at 9, so I won't get home until like 12 o'clock, and it's like a Monday night or something. Anyway, I was like, sure, let's go. We went and we watched this movie in a nearly empty cinema, and let me tell you, Will, it was really bad. Maybe the worst movie I've ever seen in the cinema before.
Oh boy!
It was quite,
really?
Oh my god! Everything from like the typical really cringeworthy humor that you'd expect. The main character of the Flash was thoroughly unlikable, and he was in it like there was 2 versions of that character in the one movie, so it was like a double.
Oh god!
It looked terrible. The CGI looked like I've seen better things on like the PlayStation 2. And the plot was nonsensical. So if you're looking for a fun action superhero movie, don't go see that one unless you want to laugh at it, which was quite funny. There's one scene where the Flash puts a baby in a microwave.
What?
Yeah.
Oh my god.
I was happy to see there was a return of Michael Keaton Batman from the 80s, which was cool for 5 minutes.
Okay.
Until, you know, the nice distraction of that didn't add too much to the overall film. And well, spoilers if you're planning on watching it, just skip ahead 30 seconds or so. I'm assuming you're not too worried about spoilers for The Flash, Will.
No, I'm surprisingly not.
At the end, there's like this world colliding scene, and it might be the worst thing I've ever seen. Just bringing all these dead actors who've previously played characters in DC movies and TV shows back with CGI. Quite disturbing, uncanny valley, and not done well, and kind of, if it was done well, it might have been alright, but the fact that it wasn't, it felt quite insensitive to see, PS2 Adam West Batman walking around. So, yeah.
Jeez.
Not great one, no,
so did
unfortunately.
They tried to bring back like a whole cast of actors and stuff with CGI, did they, at the very end?
So, yeah, and it tried to have like some heart and some sad moments, but none of them really hit because of how terrible, everything else around it was.
Oh dear.
So yeah, that's unfortunate, but we got a good laugh out of it. There's one bit where, what's his name? Batman, he goes like that classic Joker line, "You want to get nuts? Let's get nuts," and for no reason, he just sort of says it as a reference.
Right.
Yeah. So if you want to go and laugh at a movie, it's great, but I'm not sure that you'll enjoy it. And it was definitely hard to sit through for 2 hours or whatever it was. We went with our friend Jake, who doesn't even really like superhero movies to start with, and every time I looked over at him, he just looked sad. But anyway.
Great. So,
move on to our first proper segment. Or do you have something about The Flash you'd like to say, Will?
Well, no, I mean, is this the end of DC, Tiago? Is this the end of Marvel, the end of DC? We need a new superhero franchise.
There's another thing. You're gonna love this, Will. You're gonna love this. Again, if you don't want spoilers, skip ahead another 30 seconds. But at the very end, he's reset the DC timeline or whatever. And
oh god.
He gets back and he's on the phone to Batman, and he's like, "Oh, I'm coming." And then Batman comes around the corner in his car and he steps out, and it's George Clooney.
Oh really?
Oh my god! Best part of the movie.
Oh dear. So was it actual George Clooney or was it CGI?
No, they actually got George Clooney.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Who is the current Batman?
It was Ben Affleck at the beginning of the movie, and then it turned into Michael Keaton, and then it was George Clooney.
Oh dear.
Yeah. Anyway.
Oh well. Anyway. Well,
Communism.
so if you have the if you have the choice between Asteroid City or the new Flash film, you know which one to choose.
I don't think we need to tell you. Out of those two, what you should choose.
No, definitely not. Anyway, So I'm in Hungary, and it kind of dawned on me that this is the first time that I've ever been in a post-Soviet state. So if you don't know, history-wise, after the end of the Second World War, the Russians kind of pushed into Eastern Europe, and they ended up occupying the Baltic republics, and they occupied Poland, and they occupied the Czech Republic, and they occupied Hungary, and they occupied a whole number of small kind of Eastern European nations. And so Hungary was one of them. And so they installed a dictator, Matyos Rákosi, who I'm probably pronouncing wrong. They installed him as the leader of communist Hungary. And this regime kind of began, and it lasted all the way until the fall of communism, until the fall of the Berlin Wall and the collapse of the Soviet Union in, late 80s, early 90s. And it's interesting because just down the road from where we're staying is a museum called the Terror Museum. And when I first got to Budapest, I didn't really know what it was. I thought maybe it was some kind of torture museum or some kind of spooky museum. And I researched it. and its address is 60 Andrassy Avenue. Andrassy Avenue is like the main kind of road in Hungary, in Budapest, sorry. And so this building served as the headquarters, first of like the right wing. They were called the Arrow Cross, and the Arrow Cross was more or less a far right kind of Nazi sympathist group, which Hitler put in power when Hungary joined the Axis in the Second World War. But then when the Soviets came in, the kind of communist secret police within Hungary established their base there. So it's this big kind of central building, and it's been turned into a museum about the communist and fascist regime within Hungary. And it blew my mind to really be confronted with how communism actually operated on the ground within a nation state. And it was incredibly jarring, right? Like, so the thing which really shocked me was I'd never really considered as to how in a communist state the government controls everything, absolutely everything. And because it controls everything, it's able to mold and batter and shape and form like the psyche of a nation. It's able to try and like mold the people into a certain thing. You know, it can write the literature, it can paint the paintings, it has the radio programs, it has full economic control, it can control the historical narrative. So an example of this is there was like a statue kind of like a section of the exhibition which had just lots of statues in it. And you know, in like ancient Greece and ancient Rome, where it's called a frieze, you know how there's like a big kind of rectangular piece of artwork, more or less, and it's got like chariots along it, or it's got gods, or, you know, like a big kind of thing like that. Well, it only just dawned on me that the communists do the same thing, and they had exactly the same kind of frieze with workers in like overalls and slacks, and then people in suits, and then army officers and tanks in that kind of same thing that the ancient Greeks and the ancient Romans used. And they have statues of kind of big glamorous people working away, or you know, sports people or technicians or scientists. And so, you know, you walk through all of that, and then there was another section where you walked into like this propaganda hall, and it was like Hungary in the 50s and the 60s, and it was, you know, never-ending food, and you can take your holidays at these resorts, and, you know, it like a real, genuinely utopian kind of vision. And then you walk through another section, and it's like it's videos of the economic management of farming, and you know, peasant ladies collecting their eggs and depositing them, and then getting like a token back so that it can be distributed to the workers, and all of this stuff, kind of creating this whole utopian vision of a state. And then you go down to the basement, and you go more or less genuinely to where the political opponents of this state were imprisoned and tortured. And it was in that building, like it happened in the basement of that building. So myself and my friend, we were walking around through these cells, and it was horrifying. They were cramped, they were made of concrete. I think there was this one cell called the Foxhole, Foxhole. I walked into it, and it's pitch black. And the ceiling's so low that you can't stand up, so you just have to lie there. There was another cell which was kind of the opposite, where it forced you to stand up, and it was really thin and tall, so you couldn't sit down at all. And then there was one cell which was completely padded out, and obviously, you know, why is it padded out? What's happening here? And the idea was that the only way, and this is how horrible this kind of cell complex underground was, the only way you could commit suicide was by smashing your head against the cell wall and just like running at it and hoping that in one hit it will kill you. Because if you hit your head on the wall and it doesn't kill you and the guards hear that, then they take you to the padded cell, and then obviously you can't kill yourself. So it was mind-blowing. It was really quite chilling and horrendous. And then you kept going, and then eventually kind of walk into the gallows where they used to execute people. And of course, you think, hanging from a rope, it's at least, like a proper noose, suspended from a staff and everything. But I mean, it wasn't even that. It was like a flimsy bit of rope just hanging from a single log, kind of going upwards. And then, they put it around your neck and they'd pull that. And so you'd kind of be lifted up. Like, it wasn't even a proper execution kind of thing. And it just, I don't know, it really, really blew my mind as to how upstairs, walking through all of the utopian, the utopian architecture, the utopian art, the utopian literature, the idea of this perfect society, and then downstairs, the reality of that political oppression. And it made me really realize about how careful we have to be in regards to freedom when sometimes you aim for something so high and so mighty and you don't allow any opposition to anything else, then you instill this mode of fear and this mode of repression, and if things go astray from that, idea of the high and mighty of this communist state, then it must be silenced, and that's when you get into this thing of fear and repression that infiltrates everything and destroys the whole project. So it was just mind-blowing as to how that kind of utopian society could become so dark and so dreary. And then you go through the cell complex, and eventually you get to this memorial with lots of candles for the thousands and thousands of people who passed away in repression in communist Hungary. So it was really, it was really quite moving, and really affected me. So I don't know, yeah.
I like that idea of almost an artistic way of laying out the museum to hit you that way, of having the propaganda and the idea at the top, and then you go underneath and you see the reality. That's really an interesting way of doing it. But yeah, it's interesting as well that this jump that happened, they just really were in it, weren't they? Straight from, the Nazi regime, straight into a communist state. That's
the communist, yeah.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, I mean that is the thing with Hungary. They're kind of they're kind of a repressed people in that matter, but they've kept going and they've held on to it, and they've held on to what they kind of believe in, and so that's quite impressive, and they've held on to their national spirit, which I think through the tough times they've come together, and they've been through hard times. And it's this section of Eastern Europe. You go to any country, and you go to Poland, for instance, and it's like that. You go to Czechoslovakia, and it's like that. It's really quite recent as well. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, it was only, I think, 1989 is when the Berlin Wall came down, and then I think the Soviet Union officially collapsed in 1991. So it's really, the scars are still there, and you can kind of feel it. And me, as someone who's interested in history and politics, it's really interesting just to feel that in the air. So I don't know. It's interesting.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, moving on.
Know much about the specific involvement of Hungary in the collapse of the USSR?
Yeah, well, there's an interesting bit of stuff. So, in the actual, So in 1956, there was this national uprising of Hungary against communism. So there was this network of anti-communist resistors, and in 1956, there was some stuff going on in Poland. The communists were a bit distracted, and they kind of seized the moment and rose up. I think for maybe 2 weeks or something, Hungary kind of suddenly became this free state, and the West were looking on to Hungary in 1956, and they were thinking, "Oh, this is quite interesting. What are the Russians going to do? What's going to happen?" And it was Khrushchev who was in power in Russia at the time, and he was very brutal and actually just sent the Soviet army in with tanks and guns and bombs and everything, and pretty much bulldozed the Hungarian resistance. And that 1956 was really a turning point in the West, because a lot of more kind of left-wing intellectuals, they finally realized that, we can't really go on defending the Soviet Union. We can't really go on defending this communist state if they simply bulldoze into a national resistance with tanks.
Yeah.
So in regards to turning Western opinion against against communism, Hungary was important in that 1956 revolution. But then obviously it was decades on from that the fall of communism eventually occurred.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it was deeply saddening, and quite confronting. But if any of you are ever in Budapest, definitely check it out, because it's a fundamental part of the national history.
All right. Shall we move on to submarine madness? The popular topic of the week, I'd say, the talk of the town.
Yeah.
Yesterday, we'll start from the beginning, actually. You say you don't know much about this, Will. What do you know about it?
So there was a submersible which went down to see the Titanic, and 5 people were on board, and you have to pay $250,000 for a seat or something. It's got a certain amount of hours of oxygen, and then the whole thing. Well, they're finding. Well, like, they lost contact. People started searching, and now they've found debris of what seems to be a catastrophic implosion, and everyone's been pronounced dead. Yeah.
Yeah. So, that's pretty much the nuts and bolts of it. What I found really interesting is the sort of the weird kind of backstory behind why this submarine is a thing at all. This isn't the first voyage that it's done. It goes down. You get to see a bit of the Titanic, and then it comes back up. But this thing is put together like your neighbor's car that hasn't ran in like 4 years, and they've just got it running, like duct tape-esque sort of things. It was not approved by any regulatory body at all, because it couldn't have been. And there's an interesting video of a guy looking at going on it, reading the contract, and it's pretty much blatantly states that if you die on this, you can't sue us.
Right.
So essentially, you're paying $250,000, I think it was, to go.
Yeah, US dollars. Yeah.
A submarine put together by pretty much just some guy, and
right.
It was the thing that lots of people like to point to. I don't even think this is the biggest thing, but it's kind of interesting. The submarine was being piloted with one button to tell you to go up or down, and a Logitech wireless game controller, which you can get now at JB Hi-Fi for $25. So if you're about 3 miles underwater, would you really be wanting to rely on a Logitech wireless $25 game controller to, steer you around and get you back to the surface?
I thought, I I don't know, the kind of stuff that I read, which is on the BBC, they seem to make it out to be this, impressive, like a titanium capped, several inches thick, bolted piece of indestructible stuff, which was going down. I did so it's kind of, it was like hashed together by just a random guy. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it was, it obeyed the laws of physics theoretically, and it was like this thick, and like actually structurally, I think it was pretty sound. But the technology in it, the way it was controlled, the safety precautions in place were just not there.
Right.
And it's interesting. One of the people on it, and you look inside, it's literally like a pipe.
Yeah, I did see. Yeah, I saw pictures of it inside. Yeah.
And so there's 5 of you sitting in that for several hours, or in this case, like multiple days before you meet your demise. And it's like terrifying just imagining being underwater in this tiny enclosed space with limited technology, and you're running out of oxygen, and what seems to have happened is something ruptured, and the great pressure of being 3 miles underwater caused an implosion, which is...
Yeah.
I don't know, that's one of the scariest things I can think of. But
yeah.
I think it's interesting the amount of coverage it's getting as well. I don't know about... but definitely here.
Yeah, this is what I wanted to kind of talk on, is that it seems to... And I don't know... I personally, it's kind of saddened me in the way that the media's covered it, and in the way that people are generally reacting to it, because it's such a unique and interesting and odd kind of story, almost from a film or something. The amount of, I don't know, people kind of making, I don't know, making jokes about it, making memes about it, or just like the media attention on who was in there and like how many hours they have left. And like, did you see they've got like they asked James Cameron for a comment? James Cameron, the director of the Titanic, he did this thing about how he felt it in his bones that this thing was going to go up or something. I mean, it's like, and all these people have to weigh in, and it, the thing that gets me is like, well, sure, this is 5 people have died, and it was a catastrophic kind of thing. But you look at the hundreds of immigrants who just died off the Greek coast, like a few days beforehand, or and suddenly the whole world's media attention is kind of focused in on this one thing. We
talk about it all the time, don't we? It's this
media cycle
that draws attention away from things that are perhaps more important for things that are kind of exciting and new. And I think, maybe if it was just 5 regular tourists on this submarine, we wouldn't be focusing on it so much either. But the fact it was, these 5 noticeable people, and what could it be? Could that be in the plot to get all these people in the same place? And then, it's like... And I saw there's a documentary coming out in a week about it. It's like, what?
Right. Yeah.
It's insane. But yeah, I thought we'd bring it up on the show just because it's happening everywhere. There is some interesting things about it, and it also begs the question why, knowing the safety issues with it, you'd put yourself in that position.
It does, yeah. It kind of, it's like it's almost a hubris thing. You're so wealthy, you're so powerful, you can do anything. $125,000 a seat, and that doesn't even cover insurance, which I don't think there's any insurance company in their mind who would provide a plan for someone going to do that.
Yeah,
but
absolutely not.
But yeah, it really is this almost grotesque kind of, I have the money to do anything. I'm going to go to the bottom of the ocean, and I don't even think they see the Titanic through a window. I think they see it on a screen.
It's possible. I don't know.
Yeah, because you can't actually put windows in the thing. Which is even more. I mean, it is insane. And quite sad and dark. But there you go. But it has. I mean, it's done several successful dives before.
35 before, and one of the people that was on board this time had been on board for all 35 previous dives. So imagine how much has he spent on that? That's $250,000 35 times. I'm not going to do the maths, but that's a lot of money.
Yeah, it's crazy. But anyway, there you go.
That's a little bit of something a bit interesting. Next up, from something that could be interesting to the average person, to another piece of obscure Australian legislation. Well, I want to talk to you a little bit about our friends in the Greens Party today. A party that I've found myself quite frustrated with for a while now, and this is kind of the icing on the cake. And I want to get your thought on the actual policy, and I want to get your thought on the objections to it, and I want to get your thought on the idea of the Senate as a whole, because I think that might be interesting. There has been a proposed bill by Labor to put, federally this is, to put $10 billion into an investment fund, and then use the money that investment fund makes theoretically over time to build public housing, social housing. The idea being that from their best estimates and from the estimates of lots of housing organizations, that doing this, obviously not just Joe Blow's going to be investing the money, like experts, long-term investments, safe investments. They can build about 6,000 social houses per year. At the moment, what is being built is about 1,000 social houses per year. So it got
1,000 houses.
Pardon?
Is that all?
Yeah.
1,000 houses, all of Australia.
No, social houses. So houses built by the government.
Well, yeah. But so is the Australian government are they only building 1,000 houses per year?
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
So
damn.
The idea
That's not many houses.
Yeah, but the thing is, social housing is for like the lows of the lows. So we're talking like domestic violence victims.
Yeah.
People recently homeless.
I do know what. Yeah.
Stuff like that. So 1,000 isn't enough. Debatably, 6,000 isn't enough either. But
that's what I was going to say. Yeah.
We'll get into it. But the idea is, you've constantly got this flow of money coming in, so you can always stay on top of that 6,000, and over time, hopefully that can even increase.
Yeah.
It got through the lower house, and now it's gone to the upper house, and it keeps getting rejected. Obviously, the Liberals are just flat out voting against it, because that's the political game, right? Here.
Yeah.
The idea being pushed forward is like, well, they can get them, you said you'd do this and then you didn't get anything through. But what I find more interesting is the Greens are opposing this. Their argument being that why not just put the $10 billion into houses now, and that way we will like definitely get houses built, and and people can be homed right now. And then Labor's argument to that is, well, I'm not sure how many they can create, but I tried to find so much. It's like, how much if they just put $10 billion into housing now, how many houses would they create? I don't know, but the idea of
are you saying 10 million or 10 billion?
Billion.
10 billion.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So, and Labor's argument to that is, why would we just build $10 billion of housing now when we could build like so much more just over time? And the other idea is the money coming from this fund is separate to the budget. So if the Liberals got in the next term, there would still be money coming in from this fund to build houses. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah.
And and I don't know how this works. You will have to explain to me. I didn't think that this has gone like, they keep putting it through, it keeps getting rejected. I think it's going to be put through another time on Monday. We'll see what happens then. Since then, Labor's like, well, what are we going to do? So they've just put $2 billion down now to build social housing right now, to sort of like as a pathway thing for the Greens to come. But they still want to put this through. There is talk, and as I said, I don't understand how this might work, but there is talk that if it doesn't get through more times, because this is one of Labor's big election promises, they could call an election and hopefully gain enough seats that they could get it through the Senate. Now, I wanted to maybe ask you about this. I didn't think you could just call an election. Is that what a snap election is? I'm not sure.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
So, yeah, I mean, in regards to the constitutional thing, the Prime Minister can call an election whenever he really wants, as long as he gets the Governor General to sign off on it.
Okay. Well,
And I think with but what you were saying with this is one of their major election promises, in their manifesto, is governments quite often and prime ministers quite often, if one of their manifesto big promises is being blocked by another party, they can use the democracy argument, and they're like, look, we were voted in to do this. You're stopping us from doing it. Therefore, I'm going to hold another election. We're hopefully going to. I mean, the only reason to do this is to gain more seats in the upper house to get the legislation through.
Yeah.
I mean, personally, I don't think. I mean, what have you heard? Have you genuinely heard
it's not like
number
a big idea? It's just sort of been floating around, and I was just curious about it because I didn't know that you could do that. I can't think of an example
that could
of that
happen.
happening. Off the top of my head.
That could happen. Yeah.
But more importantly, I was just thinking that if you're in the Greens and you're going on about like wanting to make housing more accessible and all this stuff, you're not going to, like, as powerful as the Greens are as a minor party, they're not going to push any reform properly without the Labour doing it themselves. So it seems a bit weird to me that instead of just admitting that they lose a little bit, they not getting exactly what they want, that they would reject something that is helping people, which is sort of their whole messaging, right? It's like it happened years ago with the carbon tax. Greens blocked it because they weren't taxing enough, and then it never got through. I mean, it did with lots of concessions, but not concessions in the way of the Greens, concessions in the way of the Liberal Party. So it kind of annoys me that you sit up here and you talk a big talk about how you want all these things fixed, and when Labour tries to make a step in fixing them, and this isn't their only housing policy, right? They've got a bunch of other stuff yet to come. This is just sort of their first big step. You block it because it's not enough. And it seems so ridiculous to me that you're just blocking. And these are houses that are going to be built, as I said, for the lowest of the lows. People fleeing domestic violence, people at high risk of homelessness, people overcoming addiction. And you're not putting it through for like political gain. It's ridiculous, honestly. And I had this conversation a lot around the election. If I thought that the Greens policy was realistic, I'd absolutely vote for them because, it's just a better version, a more idealistic version of what Labour's doing. But I can't be willingly putting more people in seats that are going to stop bills that are actually making the country better for political reasons. I don't know. Which is why I was sort of thinking more about the Senate and looking back at it as the, it's the House of Lords, really. It's a bit different, but that's what it's based off. And it was originally...
Actually, Tiago, can I correct you there?
Yeah, sure.
So the Senate actually isn't based off the House of Lords at all. It's based off the American Senate.
Okay.
So we kind of... Yeah. So we get this false... I'm not sure if you ever heard this from Mr. Lehman, our great teacher from school. But we're told that the Australian political system is it's based off the Westminster system. It isn't actually. It's based off the Washminster system. So our lower house is modelled off a more kind of House of Commons, like combined with the House of Reps, as in the American House of Reps. But our upper house, our Senate, is it almost has no connection with the House of Lords at all. It's almost completely based off the American Senate in regards to a certain number of representatives from specific states around and territories around the country, which is what the American model is.
Yeah. Okay.
And those people being voted in, with the House of Lords obviously not being voted on. So it's the same to the House of Lords as in it's an upper house, but that would review legislation. But apart from that, it's far more similar to the U.S. Senate. But anyway,
Okay.
keep going.
Well, you've kind of stumped me there a little bit because I had a misconception about this, but it looks like the other house, right?
Yeah. The Senate.
The Senate, yeah, is doing most of the time is blocking things, and when you look into it, it's always this seedy, in the weeds political stuff rather than actual change. Which it seems like a weird thing to have. Why not just democratically vote everyone into one house? Why have a second one with its own sets of politics and its own ideas and different people? I don't know why you wouldn't just, have one sort of sector.
A unicameral.
And they have in Queensland, I guess.
Yeah.
Which interesting, I actually found out there wasn't even a referendum to have one house. It was just voted on in Parliament, and the Senate literally was like, no, we don't want to be here anymore, and they voted themselves off, which is just a weird little Australian history tidbit. But anyway, so...
Well, actually, I'm kind of parking the constitutional side for a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm curious on the actual on the housing thing. So, do the Greens have so Labor's like, look, we want to put this 10 billion into a fund. It'll be more sustainable for a long period of time.
Mm-hmm.
We'll be able to hit in that 6,000. It'll be a sustained growth of social housing.
Yeah.
The Greens have said, screw that. Put the 10 billion in now and just start building now.
Mm-hmm.
Are they what's their argument? Is it environmental? Is it we don't want that money going into a dodgy fund? Is it
their argument is if you put money into a fund, you're not guaranteeing that you're going to make money out of that fund. Technically. But then my argument to that would be well, everyone in this country trusts their money to go... Well, not everyone, but majority of people in this country trust their money to go into a super fund, and then that will grow. You're constantly... you're constantly trusting that people can invest money in long-term safe investments and for it to grow. So I don't know... It seems like it's just a way of sort of cutting down Labour and perhaps getting more seats to say, because a lot of people might look at it and be like, oh yeah, Wall Street investing, they're taking a big gamble, but they're not. There are investments that aren't. I mean, there is technically a chance, right?
So the Greens are trying to spin it as as a risky kind of they're not a risky kind of Labour mismanaging the public purse kind of that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
And there's one spokesperson for the Greens particularly who is just everywhere in the media at the moment here, just talking about how it's a Labour's gambling with your money. There's a possibility that no actual houses will be built. They're saying even with the money, Labour has written in the legislation that the money is to be used for social housing, but he's saying, there's no guarantee that they're going to be using that money to build houses, and it's just a bit strange. Yeah, and I can't help but feel, I want to hear your perspective on it, because I'm trying to think through it myself, but why do we have the Senate, Will? If things are going to get caught up in weird little arguments and weird things of politics,
well,
the
Senate,
why not just get it through?
I mean, the Senate... So first off, the Senate... you kind of put your finger on one of the reasons why I don't like elected upper houses, because stuff like this, because politics then begins to interfere in the upper house. And you were talking about the House of Lords. We've talked about this before. I don't know why we keep going back to the House of Lords, but you look at the House of Lords, and it is, to a far greater extent, a lot less political than the US Senate or the Australian Senate. But, I mean, the Australian Senate, so, I mean, I think the main fundamental point of it, right, is that it equalizes the states. So I can't pull these numbers off the top of my head. But actually, I think I will, because I want to get this right. Just hold on a second. I want a number. So we can cut this.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, thank you. Number of Australian seats per state. Okay, 1 second, and then another tab. Number of House of Reps by state. Australia. Sorry, it's taking longer than I expected. Get a few numbers. Okay, so welcome back. I have some numbers now. The main reason for the Senate, right, is because the House of Representatives represents people on proportional proportional representation of how many people live in those states. So, in 2016, New South Wales had 47 seats, Victoria had 37 seats, Queensland had 30 seats. This is in the House of Reps. And so it's like, okay, one state has kind of more power over the other because they have a higher population, which, like, yeah, sure, that's fine, because in a democracy, it's all about the majority and everything. But the whole point of the Senate is to try to negate that in a second chamber. So there are 76 senators, and every single state has 12 senators, and every single territory has 2 senators. So does that make sense? Like, it allows. So once a bill gets to the Senate, and let's say it really kind of stuns WA, but is really beneficial for New South Wales. Mm-hmm. In the House of Reps, we can get that passed because New South Wales has however many it was, 47. Yeah. Members compared to Australia's smaller number. It gets to the Senate, Australia's like, well, we got 12 senators, New South Wales has got 12 senators. We can now have, once we've gotten to this stage, we can now have a nitpicky, decent debate and on an equal kind of footing. Mm-hmm. And then if they disagree on things, they can send it back to the House of Reps, and then the House of Reps can tweak it, and then tweak it in a way which the equality kind of agrees with, and then it goes back to there, and then the Senate can agree on it. So it's almost like it's like 2 versions of Australia, right? Yeah. It's like a democratic representation of Australia, which is fully based on the proportions of people in each state, and they're discussing things. And then it's all of the states, it's complete equals, and it makes sense in my head. And I mean, it's quite an abstract idea, but it makes sense in my head that those 2 bodies come together to really, really get down to earth on legislation. I mean, does that kind of make sense as to why we have the Senate?
Yeah, it does, but sorry. How do you deal with... Okay, so then we go and look at a system like in the UK. How do they handle it? Because the House of Lords, as I am to understand, does not represent, you don't have people for Wales and you don't have people for Scotland, or do you? No, you don't. So, I mean, the House of Lords is... Oh, sorry, I would have done more research into this if I realised this was going to be the topic of conversation. But you have... The House of Lords is made up of... The theory is the House of Lords is made up of people in good standing within society, or intelligent standing within society. So it's a different... it's a fundamentally different kind of reason than the Senate, say, in the US or Australia, where it's about the equality of the states. In the House of Lords, it's more about
It's more about professionalism and unpolitical, like scientists, military generals, not generals. There's an astrologer. No, it's not an astrologer. An astronomer. There's an astronomer. Oh, wow. There's an astronomer in there. There's a whole bunch of really interesting kind of intellectual people who are somewhat apolitical, who can sit down and take the time and go through it bit by bit by bit. On a side note, the House of Lords has recently, well, not recently, over the past number of years, become kind of hyperinflated with people who have just been put in there as favors, which really brings the level down, which I think is a national tragedy. But yeah, it's a different kind of system. I don't know. I mean, does that kind of solve your problem?
Yeah, but I'm just wondering if they can get away, like, I don't know, they seem to operate okay without that.
No, so there was actually. Yeah, there have been several points in the history of the UK where the Prime Minister has gotten really angry at the House of Lords because they've been refusing to pass stuff on a political basis.
Okay.
So the classic one is, you probably haven't heard of him, there's a British Liberal Prime Minister called Lloyd George, and he's trying to pass this thing called the People's Budget, which is like the big kind of progressive budget to help poor people and minimum wage and yada yada yada. But the Lords, the Conservative majority Lords, won't pass it. So the thing, I think he made like 400 Liberal peers in the House of Lords and just like stacked it full of people who would support him, and then he got it through. Or he threatened that. I don't think he actually did it. And then the same was with Tony Blair. Tony Blair filled the Lords with Labour peers to try and balance it because it was so much filled with Conservative peers. So that political kind of thing still happens within the House of Lords, but to a lot less extent, I would say, than the US Senate or the Australian Senate. I mean, Gough Whitlam, was he not dismissed because he couldn't get his budget through the Australian Senate?
That was the nuts and bolts of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Because the country just didn't have any money. He couldn't get the treasury kind of function. So I mean, in regards to a democratic setup, I think two chambers is always better because it just provides another check and balance, and it doesn't give too much power into too little people's hands. I mean, in regards to the Queensland unicameral parliament, that's all right because it's just Queensland. That kind of can work. And in New Zealand as well, New Zealand's a smaller country. There's only a few million people there. That can work as well. But 23 million people spread out over a very vast country. One half of it very rich in resources but low in population compared to another half which is high in population but perhaps less lower than resources. Once legislation gets to a higher level, you need that kind of equality between the two sides. And then of course the Senate, their voting system, their voting system is different, but their terms are different. Is it like a third of the Senate goes up to election every election?
I think that's
rather than the whole Senate. Yeah. Which then kind of provides, you're in there for a longer period of time than the average MP in the House of Reps, so you get to become a bit more experienced. So yeah, it's an interesting system.
Yeah,
but,
it is. It seems like how has someone not come up with a flawless system yet? Will, tell me that.
Well,
we've got all these political experts. No one's come up with something that's flawless. We can develop AIs to make perfect pictures, but we can't work out how democracy can work perfectly,
It's 9:30 in the morning and you just asked me for the perfect political state. Oh dear.
Oh well.
I mean, look. I mean, my thing as a boring old organic kind of conservative is that we're human. We will never get to a perfect thing. That's why we need democracy, because it isn't perfect. It's just this hobnob bunch of stuff which is thrown together, and everyone's got a slightly different system, and most of the time it works and it gets stuff through and people trundle along. I mean, you saw what I was just saying about the communists in Hungary, or like the fascists. I mean, you try to aim for that perfect system, and boy, you can end up in some pretty dangerous waters.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, in a democracy, and this is going to be the most year 2 statement ever, but if, let's say, for example, because we're just talking about it, the general population of Australia was like, you know what, we want the Senate to be abolished, and people were out and they were raising their voices and letting everyone know. Ideally, then a party would make their main policy about that, and then when it comes to elections, they could be voted in. And that's how the system could change and could evolve, I guess. With a referendum as well, obviously, if you're talking about the Constitution. Whereas, if we were just like, nah, this is the perfect system, when it's time where something doesn't age as well, or it's not relevant anymore, it couldn't be changed without democracy, and then that change comes with its own imperfections. So I guess it's just one of those things that we got to sort of deal with. But yeah, it's just
actually.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, no, I wanted to say an interesting point that you just raised about abolishing the Senate. What was it? Yeah, I think the Conservatives in the UK at one point were going to abolish the House of Lords. So they were gonna fundamentally alter the House of Lords for some political reason, because they were in coalition with the Liberal Democrats, and the Liberal Democrats wanted that to happen. Yada yada yada. Anyway, Britain's weird because they don't have the rule where you need a 2/3 nationwide referendum to change the constitution. And so David Cameron just kind of, you can, like, in Britain, if you wanted to abolish the House of Lords, you could just put it to a vote in the House of Commons, and if it passed a simple majority, then it would go. So Britain's quite odd in that way, in which it doesn't have referendums. And I'm saying, maybe Britain should have some kind of referendum style if it tries to alter the constitution. But I'm saying Australia is quite good in that regard, that it has that check and balance in place. Yeah. But anyway, sorry, that's another point.
Well, there you go. We've talked extensively about the other House of Parliament today.
Yeah.
We could go a little bit over if you still want to talk about Greece, Will. I'm sure the people won't.
No, I can.
Considering we've.
I can put that into another episode. I don't mind.
Well, thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed all things fence sitters today, from the fun sort of. There wasn't really much fun in this episode, to be honest.
No, not really. Pretty deep and dark.
But Asteroid City and The Flash at the beginning. There you go.
Yeah.
And I want people to have a think about the way that we vote in terms of. You know what? I don't know what point I'm trying to make here. Have a good weekend, everyone. If you like what you heard, subscribe, like, go on Facebook, all that good stuff. Any closing comments, Will?
Let's make an Australian unelected upper house.
Arson could be the cause of a fire at the Sydney home of controversial comedian, commentator and YouTuber Friendly Geordies.
Supine protoplasmic invertebrate jellies.
And to get hot, I got hairy legs that turn blonde in the sun.
I will not be lectured about sexism and misogyny by this man.
The decision of one man to launch a wholly unjustified and brutal invasion of Ukraine.
Up yours, woke moralists. We'll see who cancels who.